Thanks so much, Diana, and that has given us a really comprehensive set of science-based inputs from evaluations and local adaptation strategies all the way to the big governance and incentives for a transition to a sustainable future. And I'd like to start just by posing, inspired by Sugil and Dirk particularly, what's the depth of the shift we're talking about? And you've addressed, all of you, issues ranging from governance, economics, and the deeper values. And just to kind of probe that a bit on the economic agenda. So, we have, as most of us here, pursued a lot of research that would suggest that, yes, putting an economic value on natural capital, like, for example, the ideas on putting the right price on carbon, on payments for ecosystem services, would take us a long way towards a green growth trajectory. But if one links that to the insights that you put forward, Sugil, that we also need to build resilient societies, and most of the research shows that resilience is in fact paradoxically often in contradiction with optimization and efficiency, because resilience requires redundancy in institutions and social networks and in how we leave a certain buffer in ecosystems, and that if we need to respect absolute ecological space, then of course a price on natural capital may just lead to the fact that the rich will, so to say, vacuum clean the remaining resources, and you're remaining with a segregated world because you don't have substitutability in, for example, fresh water and natural resources, or many of the natural resources. So do you think that we're talking of something beyond putting the right price, to say beyond GDP, or is it so that a strategy of just setting a right price on nature will be enough within the economic model we have, or do we need to rethink the model in its more fundamental architecture? A small question to kick off the discussion. Sugil, do you want to give a bit of a Korean perspective on this?
I agree that we are already locked in for a 4 degree centigrade temperature rise. And that means that this global warming, or what Thomas Friedman calls global weirding, is going to get much worse than what we've been experiencing in recent years. And so on the one hand, we have to make efforts to mitigate global warming. At the same time, we have to be prepared to cope with the feared impacts of global warming that is bound to occur. So we have to do both things at the same time. Now, in terms of addressing responding to the coping with climate change impacts, that's basically requires mostly the efforts to work on the infrastructures of the society, the farming infrastructure, the health, and well, I have listed 10 areas in which we have this national plan to adapt to the climate change, but I can only remember 2 right now. But and that is going to take a lot of resources. Now, in the wake of the global financial crisis in late 2008 and early 2009, Korean government launched what it called Green New Deal, which is basically mostly the series of projects to enhance our resilience to the expected global warming to happen, and that, for example, we spent a larger portion of that Green New Deal in order to restore what we call 4 major rivers, for the purpose of increasing the water holding capacity of Korean river systems, because there is going to be a lot of more increasingly severe concentrated rainfalls during the 1-month monsoon season, and then we will have the worsening of the long period of droughts in the rest of the years. So we had to spent a considerable sum of resources for that purpose. And then, of course, we also had to make use of the balance in order to invest in our renewable energy technologies and development of green technologies. So I think we have to do both at the same time, and both, especially the actions to mitigate the impact of climate changes, we now find have been contributing a lot to improving the quality of living environments for the Korean people.
Okay, but yeah, I really want to also get Dirk's perspective on kind of the depth of the economic paradigm. Thanks, Sugil. Yes, Dirk?
Yeah, no, I agree actually with my colleague from Korea. I mean, when we talk about low carbon development, we are actually talking about transforming the basic structures of the global economy. It's the energy system, it's land use, and it is urban areas, urbanization, in a situation in which we do see an urban shift. So moving these energies, all these systems towards low carbon, zero carbon, decarbonize those, is obviously about getting the prices right, because we are living in a market economy. With wrong prices and wrong price signals, all these transformations will be very, very difficult and costly also. They may fail. But beyond that, it's obvious that these kind of transformations need technologies, need new regulatory frameworks and governance innovations, and probably also lifestyles. Diets, food, energy, the nexus issue. This is all related also to how we organize our lifestyles in the future.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Trying to achieve these transformations without the right market signals, I agree, it makes it extremely difficult, which I believe makes it even more important for investing in science, technology, and research, because often science can develop new options and opportunities that enable societies to deal with problems that politicians sometimes have trouble grappling with. So the combination of new investments in science and technology addressing these issues, as well as regulations that deal with things like improving energy efficiency in automobiles and cars and in houses, I think are part of the picture, but it's certainly much more complicated when the price signals don't help.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, Michael?
According to our analysis, we spent a lot of time on investment on the uncertainty theory. And what we find is, yes, the price is important, but even more is kind of the uncertainty of the price signals of the many other commodities except carbon. How much information do we have on that one? And this is really a main driver of the investment decision. So here there's a very strong role for science to actually reduce that uncertainty and actually put these information uncertainties out there, just like with our hackathon, because this is a tool for an investor and also for governments to actually coordinate risks on investment on land, for example. And maybe what I saw is not many people noted down our website. Please do so and disseminate the information because from Dirk's kind of, what was it, the ingredients of cooperation, we also have a punishment mechanism, and this will be the revelation of the winner and those who did not contribute. So this is the value of information and the power of free information.
Thank you. So briefly, Sugil, before continuing on the next topic.
I think we have to approach from two sides, from the demand side as well as on the supply side. And pricing would be an effort to stimulate demand reactions, but price alone cannot go very far if the price elasticities are very low. Now, we have to develop and invest in green technologies such as renewable energies and make those technologies available. That would help improve the elasticities to a pricing approach from the demand side.
Yeah, thank you. And just as a little empirical experience from exactly that area, Sweden, as you may be aware, has operated a carbon tax of 100 euros per ton of carbon dioxide since 1992. Any economist would claim that to be an abnormally high tax. It has led to a total decoupling of industry with economic growth, but still the per capita emissions have increased with GDP growth over that period. So the rebound effect is very, very strong and remains strong. So that's why I think your reflections are that you need to have a combined strategy of putting the right price combined with leadership and governance and regulations is probably one key strategy here. Florian, we have a set of questions as well from the floor.
Yes, exactly. We received a quite huge set of questions, actually. So I asked for very short answers, and so we try to really be fair and give everybody one or maximum two questions. Let me start with Michael with a technical question from Dr. Maddalena Campioni from the Scenario Development. Can you kindly elaborate how the scenarios have been developed and how policymakers, and if at all, have been involved in the development of the scenarios you showed and in their dissemination?
Thank you. Very short. This was actually a collaboration with WWF International, and we jointly developed those scenarios, and it actually went out to the entire network for review, which was a very painful exercise. The scrutiny was much harder than with any other peer-reviewed journal, actually. And so this was also a great social experience for us, the construction of those scenarios with an NGO partner, very critical one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. The next one is Narashima. Narashima, this is a question from Andras Slinsky from the Technical University of Vienna, and he asks, many rural communities rely only on local resources for food and energy in the absence of infrastructure. Can we help them out of poverty while preserving their independence?
Yes, I think there are opportunities for doing that. It is, of course, a debate that goes on for ages to what extent people ought to be integrated into the modern society and to what extent they ought to maintain their own integrity, and they ought to have that autonomy to make that decision themselves. But specifically in the domain of energy services, there are a lot of examples where distributed systems that are self-run by communities where they voluntarily opt to maintain and run the systems and pay for those systems, that use the local resources, that maybe even use resources that are byproducts of their livelihoods, have worked. And those are, in fact, examples that ought to be replicated. So certainly there are successful examples of that.
Thank you very much. Now it's a little bit more complicated. I tried to combine 3 questions into one for Dirk, because these questions were from Dr. Bosniakovic, an independent scholar from Switzerland, then from Oscar van Vliet, a friend from IIASA here, and Patrick Nowak, also from Scenario Development. The tectonic regime shifts have been taking place either peacefully or, more often, violently, both within and between states. The present global security structure is not likely to be able to avoid violent conflicts. So how can science contribute? But let me combine that, as I said. The question is also, if we now get such social contracts in that direction, how long do you think will it take to seal them? And this leads back to also what Michael mentioned. What if nations, people break these contracts, or if they don't sign it?
So the power shifts first, because I think this is really important to have in mind. I think that if you look into the past, into the history, you can find that normally these big tectonic power shifts resulted not only in conflicts, but into war situations. I think we can be much more optimistic this time, because economic global interdependencies help us to organize cooperation around these interdependencies. So we are mutually vulnerable. This is helpful. So I'm optimistic, actually, that we will find a way out of the economic crisis. This is my first sentence. My second sentence is that we have been seeing that many of these basic ingredients of cooperation need to be rebuilt now. Now, when you think about the European Union, transatlantic community during the last 5 decades or so, there has been built up trust, joint narratives, elements how to punish opportunistic behavior, all these kind of things which you need at any scale to cooperate. And they are all eroding now, no? Because we need to bring actors together which has not been working together beforehand. We suggested a proposal for a research program, which was, and the first sentence was very simple. The first sentence only mentioned the names of the presidents and finance ministers of the not G8, G20 members. Most of the experts in the commission, where we discussed the proposal, did not even knew the names of these top global leaders now. Mm. Now, this shows that we are living in a completely different world when it comes to global cooperation. So we need strategies for peaceful power transformation on the one hand side, and we need strategies to invest into these basic elements of cooperation on many, many levels. IIASA has a huge experience in these areas because you have been found in a situation in which people thought that investing in joint knowledge production between very different actors, Cold War, creates legitimacy and trust. So this is one of these mechanisms which we need to have in mind. But there are many other ones, of course.
Mm. So, short estimation how long you think it would take to transfer to such new contracts in society?
Stability. I mean, I'm an optimist, and I hope that driven by this kind of crises, economic ones, and knowledge, sustainability issues, we can move forward rapidly towards new contracts on the international level. If you read the new book by Ian Bremmer, he's one of the most important risk analysts in the political science domain. He argues that he thinks that the international community might need 20 years to build up such a new international system which really works. 20 years is a lot of time in the situation which we are in.
Mm. Thank you very much. The next question goes to Sogil from Dr. Yevgeny Schwartz from WWF in Russia. And he thinks that green growth strategy should be different in carbon fuel dependent and in exporting countries such as South Korea and Russia. What's your take on that? Mm-hmm.
Well, let me just give a counterexample to that, which is that many many oil exporters in Middle East, such as Kuwait or UAE, are investing in the development of renewable energy technologies in order to prepare for this eventual running down or running out of oils that they have. So there may be a difference in terms of speed. And besides a green growth strategy, I mean, this is a very common dictum nowadays, that there is no one-size-fits-all prescription for green growth. So it has different policy components depending on the national characteristics, but the fact is that we are running down on the fossil fuels, and even the oil exporting countries now have begun to prepare for this eventual outcome by building the renewable energy capabilities, as well as investing in adaptation to global warming that is bound to happen anyway.
Thank you very much, Sugil. A very interesting, though kind of different question to Bill. Has green growth replaced the 3 pillars of sustainable development? And this question comes from Geoffrey Skipper from the OPEC Fund for International Development.
Well, I think a lot of the focus in the United States right now is on green growth, although that's not the term we use by it, recognizing that the transformation of the energy sector is absolutely essential to trying to meet some of the challenges with the environment. That's why I mentioned in the narrative, I try to find narratives, at least in my country, that I think is going to appeal to a wide variety of the sectors, including business and the public, and in government, as well as to the scientific and the environmental community. And that's why I was trying to emphasize that. I really think it's essential to include innovation in the mix as well as sustainability. That if we're really going to appeal to the people that make decisions, at least in our country, it's going to have to show that there's the potential for economic development and good jobs, high standards of living. I think that has to go hand in hand with trying to make progress on the environmental issues.
Thank you very much. And last not least, Diana, this is a question by Louis Bockel he's a policy analyst in the FAO. What indicators should we use in sustainable policy monitoring?
Well, it depends what sort of policies you're talking about. So we already have a lot of set of indicators for the cases I was talking about. So if you're talking about carbon offsets, the measures should be the additional reduction in greenhouse gases, and the other one is contribution to sustainable development, which of course is difficult to measure, but there are a number of indicators that one could use for that. I think part of the challenge we have is that as we evolve new forms of environmental governance, whether they're markets or new clubs or new sets of regulations, is that in turn places new demands on science. And in fact, one of the reasons I'm arguing for more rigorous evaluation, clearer ability to explain confidence in one's models and the limitations of one's models, is that the policy community and the development community is demanding better science to validate these policy experiments. So I actually think that whilst we're developing things like sustainable development goals, we also are having to measure forest carbon more rigorously for REDD, or we're having to, I've always remembered, I think it was Gretchen Daly, who is sort of the mother of payments for environmental services, saying we've convinced people that this is the way to go, but we don't even know how to measure some of these services. We've got to start being rigorous about how we measure them. So I think that there are a whole set of scientific questions that have been turned back on us by efforts in governance and policy. And I just wanted to stay in terms of Bill's comments about competitive approaches to getting solutions for development. I think that viewing a lot of what we're doing as policy experiments is a good way to go, but I wonder how you're going to actually evaluate the success of the various experiments that are being funded. What metrics will we use, and how will we measure them in ways that are really convincing to the people who are funding the experiments?
Thank you very much, Diana. I think there are many questions which arise from our discussion here. These were all questions from the audience, and I hand over to you, Johan.
Thanks, Florian. And I'm looking at the time, unfortunately. Time is up for us, so we'll have to round up here. I would have loved to ask you whether you think that we, in fact, can succeed in a journey which I think the discussion has centered around, which is that we have technologies, we have know-how, we have methods to put the incentives in place, but will that be enough, or do we need to also strengthen global governance in a very profound way? And I think that question will be hanging there, and something that will come back during the couple of days remaining, or today and tomorrow. I'd just like to wrap up very briefly by saying the following. I think that one thing that comes out of this discussion very clearly is that we have a new agenda. I mean, we're going from the old definition of sustainable development, which has largely been about a sector approach to minimizing environmental impacts, to a new agenda where, as you pointed out, Sugil, we need to pursue green growth strategies, recognizing that global sustainability is now an agenda that affects us all at all scales and sectors. Clearly pointing out that, and I think, Diana, your point is really a consensus point in the panel, that it will require experimentation. We're in the kind of deep end of the pool. We will have to allow ourselves to step up as scientists to also have new co-designed, co-produced experiments on solutions that this has to be also wrapped with evaluations and enforcement mechanisms by the end of the day. But that we also must admit that we don't have all the answers. I mean, I think it's clear from a discussion like this that if we're talking of a new social contract from a completely new value base among all nations in the world, that's an enormous enterprise that will require a new type of relationship also between not only nations but industries and cultures, religions across the world. So clearly we won't run out of jobs as scientists over the next 40 years, so IIASA will go a very bright future over the coming decades. But I also think it's a huge responsibility for us to seal that contract, perhaps a bit faster than 20 years, Dirk, but still to move towards that kind of transition. So thank you so much, and with that, I think we're in for lunch break. I'd like to thank the panel, thank Michael Narasimha for your very thoughtful IIASA scientist inputs to this discussion, and I'm sure it will continue because this is perhaps at the heart of the biggest complex challenge we're facing right now. So thank you very much, and let's give the panel a hand.